and it comes from, they actually were Fitzgeralds. So Butler is actually a nickname for that branch of the Fitzgerald family, which I know if there's any historians watching this thing, they'll cringe when I say is associated with Kilkenny, but they are. I mean, that was primarily where they're associated with. And I know. Pardon?
Why would they cringe?
Well, because they extended actually all the way to the Shannon, through Offaly, and it was like our assembly districts. They were like gerrymanders, so their territory. But with apologies to the purists, let's just think of them as from Kilkenny. But they were very loyal to the English crown, almost, as I said, from when they first stepped foot in Ireland and before. And they had come from East Anglia, whereas the Fitzgeralds of Kildare came from the borders of England and Wales. The guy who sort of set up the whole thing was Gerald. It was the French version of Gerald. Anyway, but the Ormond branch of the Geraldines were rewarded for their support of the crown by being given the right to 10% of all the wine that was broken in bulk, that was decasked in Ireland. So that was a huge revenue for them. Now,
there was a thing about them. At that time there was a warmer period. Is that why they were able to grow wine?
Oh, I don't think so. They may have in a very small scale, but Ireland never.
Around the 1600s.
Probably one of those, little interesting stories. But by and large, all the wine came in from Europe.
Oh.
Yeah, there was massive. Like it was like our oil industry. Yeah, massive. We paid for it largely by selling the age-old crop of oats, barley, and other things like cattle. Horses, we were probably still are the premier producer of horses. Tremendous stud farms, all of them. So there was those wonderful dogs and Irish setters and so on. So there was a lot of things that the Europeans bought from us, but wine was probably the biggest import. Oh, they drank vast quantities of it in the great halls. No, not the peasants. No, but in the big halls, in the hall of Kiltyne, there would be vast quantities of wine, of European wine, mostly Spanish, consumed at one of those events. Anyway, I'm not sure what kind of bottles they used or but it was certainly decasked. So they became known as the boteliers. They were the butlers because it was from, that's where the name came from. The bottlers of the wine. In other words, they probably then resold that wine at great profit, and that was the source of one of their major sources of their wealth. And they were known as the butlers. So it's as simple as that. Now she came from a bottler family, and they had several castles. Most of those, it would be a mistake to think that the Fitzgeralds had their castle in Kildare and that's it. Most of them would have literally dozens of castles. I mean, dozens. And that's also true in Europe. If you travel in Europe, you will get the grand tour of the various castles of this particular prince. So, and so the family was spread out throughout these various castles. Now, Eleanor was born in one of them, a very important one, from the Butler, from the Butler's family, and an aristocratic lady like her was a very important property from the get-go. So she was groomed for marriage to a suitable chieftain lord when she was 15 or more. And in recognition of the fact that a chieftain or a lord relied very heavily on his wife to run his estate, because he was often a fairly rough and tumbled kind of a guy.
Sounds like they were mostly drunk.
I suspect they probably had many hangover mornings, no doubt. And perhaps that was a compliment to the hostess, to the woman, was able to provide the wine. But the sheer logistics of running not one but dozens of these castles was a huge undertaking, so that a woman who was destined to be that kind of person needed to be educated pretty quick and had to absorb an awful lot of skills very quickly, and before she became an old maid. And an old maid was about 19, which is, by the way, when she got married. Because their virginity was in doubt after that, maybe before that. So they started to, their shelf life started to run off a little bit. But apart from their good looks, their actual administrative capabilities was of enormous value and very highly treasured. And that would be well known by the time somebody would come as a suitor.
She spoke many languages.
She would have to speak many languages and be literate in many languages. She'd have to be able to write and speak English and Irish very vehemently, because they were straddled both worlds. She would have had to have spoken French, because the Normans still spoke French, and absolutely certainly she would have to speak and write Latin. So those are at least those minimums, and probably Spanish as well. Now, not just, the couple fuckle, but she would really have to be very proficient in them, because it was up to her to generally act as host and diplomat when people from Spain, France, England, and so on visited her husband's castle. And while he got drunk or went off on a boar hunt or something, she probably was taking care of the serious business. So that helps you understand why she was such a remarkable woman, because she was trained to be a remarkable woman from before she could walk. She was told and made to understand that she was a very important part of the Butler family power, and she certainly lived up to it. But she also, interestingly enough, and this one kind of makes her a little different, she also was a great outdoors woman, and she was a very accomplished horsewoman, which saved her life many times and saved her husband, the Earl's, life many times. She was an extraordinarily capable woman in the roughest, toughest possible situations, and could fend for herself and fend for him, and usually did. He was much weaker physically and mentally than she was. So he was extraordinarily blessed. He probably would have died. He would have died many times. And people have speculated about. So you could say that she's important in the sense that she kept a man alive who became very instrumental, or very associated with that period of Irish history. So he was a very thin, pale, aristocratic type of person, But rugged, he sustained a tremendous amount of hardship. They both did. But he was very arrogant, and extremely arrogant, and because he was a Fitzgerald. And they had an incredible opinion of themselves. So did the O'Neills. And perhaps with some good reason. But certainly they were noted at the English court for their extraordinary haughtiness and arrogance.
What would be considered? The seating arrangements or their retinue?
I would imagine just about every piece of their deportment. They're quick. They're very quick to anger for the slightest slight. If you didn't show appropriate respect, you probably got a torrent of abuse. If you've ever seen somebody who really fancies themselves, it kind of just emanates from them.